Hey everyone, this is FIDE Master Kostya Kavutskiy here once again for Chess.com, and today I'll be wrapping up my series showing you all the highlights from the recently concluded London Chess Classic. So in today's video, I wanted to show you a few highlights from our two eventual finalists, which were GM Boris Gelfand and GM Hikaru Nakamura. First excerpt I want to show you guys here, it comes from Gelfand's semi-final match against GM Michael Adams, one of the best players ever to come from England. Of course, the semifinals were 2-game matches of rapid chess, and the winner of those 2 games would then advance to the final. So here Gelfand is playing white, and black's last move was a serious blunder, knight d7, trying to trade off white's knight on e5, but this ran into a neat little tactical trick. So if you want to find it real quick, then go ahead and pause your video and try to find a way white can win some material here. And Gelfand here played the really nice move, castles long. Of course, this is a move you can easily overlook. White castles, and the king is suddenly attacking the rook on b2, and white's rook on d1 is attacking the knight on d7. So of course, black has 2 pieces hanging, and they would love to play rook b7, but that loses material because of the bishop on f3. So Adams was forced to play knight takes e5, king takes b2, and white has essentially won an exchange. But winning the game from here was actually not so simple, and I think Gelfand definitely showed some nice technique. So Adams traded his knight for the bishop and took this pawn on c4. Now it definitely looks like black has some good compensation here for the exchange because they have 1 pawn and the bishop has this nice square on d5 where it's going to be protected by the e6 pawn, and it will look at both sides of the board. So I definitely think white has some serious work to do before they can collect the full point, especially against such a strong and solid player as Michael Adams. But here Gelfand started with rook d8 check, activating his rook, king h7, and rook c1. Definitely the first thing you want to do when you have an extra exchange is try and activate your 2 rooks as much as possible so they can show their dominance over the minor piece. Bishop d5 and rook c3. King g6, h4. So Gelfand fixes this pawn on h5, and eventually he's going to play g4 and try to create a passed pawn on the king side. And that's really the only way white can try and win this position, is by creating a passed pawn and using the 2 rooks to support this pawn. White would definitely love to trade a pair of rooks at some point so that black is only left with a bishop, but this is fairly difficult in this position, and I really don't see a way white can force a trade of rooks. So Gelfand chooses to start just playing on the king side and hoping to play g4 soon and create a passed pawn. King f6 was played, a3, king e5, rook h8, g6, and now g4. So this was, of course, white's whole plan. And I believe Adams here is doing the right thing. He brought his king to the center because this is really black's only chance to try and hold the position. It really won't be enough to keep the king on the king side and stay passive, because eventually white's rooks will dominate black's bishop and the king can get into the game, and I think eventually white will win if black just sort of stays passively. So Adams correctly tries to make some counterplay of his own. Here he played h takes g4, f takes g4, and king d4. And already black has a pretty serious threat here, which is rook b7 check, followed by king c2 and bishop e4 check, where white is in serious trouble of losing the rook on c3, since then king d2 would be met with rook b2 check. So white already has to be a little bit careful here not to let black get too much counterplay with this idea of rook b7 check. So Gelfand played rook e3, and now Adams played this move f5, which is fairly controversial, but I think it was a good practical decision because it definitely gave him some counterplay. His idea is to try and push this pawn forward to f4 and really start bothering white's rook, and eventually hopefully push the c pawn down the board and create counterplay that way. Now Gelfand actually had a very strong move here, which was rook d8, pinning the bishop to black's king and creating the threat of rook takes e6. So black really doesn't have time to take on g4 because the e6 pawn would then be hanging. And after something like king c4, white can play g takes f5, g takes f5, and h5. And I think white has a pretty serious advantage here because the king on c4 is actually quite awkward. It's blocking its own pawn, it's blocking the bishop, and white's h-pawn is, well, it's quite strong. So black is in serious trouble here and probably losing by force. In any case, Gelfand didn't find this rook d8 move, which was very strong, and decided to just take on f5. Adams recaptured, and now h5. Of course, rook d8 was still a strong move, but Gelfand simply decided to start pushing his h-pawn as quickly as possible, which is definitely a reasonable idea. Here Adams played f4, rook h3, rook b7 check, king c1, and this was actually a critical moment in the game. I think black could actually create enough counterplay to draw with this move f3, which Adams did not play, but I do think this is quite a strong idea. And the point is to simply block white's rook from controlling the third rank. So already black is starting to play king c3, and then maybe bishop e4 and threaten checkmate on b1. And this is quite an annoying threat for white to deal with. Now white can play very precisely and try to fight for an advantage, but I think with correct play, black should be doing reasonably well here. Perhaps rook h4 check, and here king d3 is a very accurate move. King c3 is definitely an idea to threaten bishop a2 followed by rook b1 checkmate, but after the move rook c8, white attacks the c-pawn, forces black to play c4, and now h6, and this pawn is simply too strong and black can't create any threats against white's king. So instead of king c3, more accurate would be king d3, so that the king doesn't block the c-pawn, and now black can threaten c4 and c3, bishop a2, and rook b1 checkmate. Another very strong idea for black is to play rook b3, followed by checking on c3 and creating a perpetual check. Because if the king moves to d1, black can then move their rook to a3, threaten mate on a1, and white's king will have to retreat. And I think this definitely would have given black enough counterplay to actually equalize the game. Eventually white would have to acquiesce to a repetition of moves. Instead of f3, however, Adams played bishop e4, which probably gives away all chances of making a draw, but only because Gelfand was able to proceed really accurately from this point on. He played the move rook d8 check, king e5, and h6. And this pawn isn't quite threatening to go to h7 yet, but it's keeping both of black's pieces tied down to the h7 square, which gives white's king and rooks a lot more freedom to do some damage here. Black played c4, and white played king d2. So now he's starting to play rook h5 check, the black king will have to move, or bishop f5, and then king c3, and then this c4 pawn will be quite difficult to defend. Adams played rook b2 check. Of course, now king c3 would run into rook b3, and white would lose the rook on h3. So king e1 is forced, rook b1 check, and rook d1. So white has gotten out of the checks, and now Adams retreated with rook b7. And here comes rook h5 check, and this was really the last chance that Adams had to potentially keep the game going. He should have played bishop f5, and after a move like h7, it definitely seems like white is getting a really good endgame with excellent winning chances. The point of pushing h7 is that it now forces black to trade his rook away. So after rook takes, h7, rook takes, bishop takes, and rook d7, I think white is very close to winning here. They're going to take the a pawn, and then the a3 pawn will start running up the board, and white's king is really well placed to deal with all of black's pawns in the center. So I definitely think the rook is showing its full potential here against black's bishop, and with good play, white should be able to squeeze out a win. That said, that was definitely black's last chance. Instead, Adams blundered with the move king f6, and after rook d4, he could basically resign, because suddenly all of black's pieces along the fourth rank are hanging, and black is simply losing too much material here. And the game concluded in just a few more moves. Rook b1 check was played, king d2, rook b2 check, king c3. There's no danger now to white's king, and Gelfand safely marches it up the board. Rook c2 check, king b4, bishop h7, and rook takes f4 check, king g6 was played, rook h3. White's rooks have everything under control, and black's bishop is clearly being underutilized. And of course, white's king is in good shape as well. e5 was played, rook takes c4, rook takes f2. And after rook c7, Adam simply had to resign because the threat of rook g7 check was too strong. So after winning this game, Gelfand went on to win the semifinal match, and he would meet Hikaru Nakamura in the finals. Thanks a lot for tuning in and watching this video on YouTube. If you want to see the rest of this video, then do head on over to the main site, Chess.com. Sign up to be a member, and then you can watch the full feature-length video. Otherwise, I'll see you here next time for more highlights from the London Chess Classic.